Hey guys, it's Ellie from Ellie's Book Club back with another video, and in today's video I am going to be showing you guys my updated Stephen King book collection. So before we get started with this video, I just want to say I'm not trying to brag about how many books of his that I own, and I also want to say that I haven't read all of the books that I own by him. There's actually a lot of his books that I own that I haven't read, so I apologize in advance for that. But let's get started. So first up we have Carrie. This is Stephen King's first book that he ever published. I'm pretty sure he was writing before he published this book, but this was the first one he ever published, and I love this book. I highly recommend this book if you're starting out with Stephen King, or if you don't necessarily know where to start with reading his books. You might as well should just start with the beginning and read his first book. But it's about this teenager who is in high school, and her name is Carrie, and she goes through average high school teenager struggles, except here's the twist. She has telekinetic powers, and at prom something goes wrong and she lets her powers get the best of her. I really enjoyed this book. I sat down one night and just read it all in one night, and I really enjoyed it. The movie is also pretty good too. Not the newer one. I personally didn't like the newer one, but the old movie of Carrie is definitely really good. Highly recommend this book. The next book in my collection is Salem's Lot. I absolutely love this book. This is definitely one of the scariest books I have read. So basically what it's about is it's about this guy named Ben Mears, and he goes to Jerusalem's Lot, and there is a bunch of vampires and the town is struggling to survive, and Ben Mears tries to find what's causing this, and he tries to stop it, but little does he know the terrors that happen in this book. This book is so good. Literally a 5 out of 5 stars for me. I absolutely adore this book. It is so good. I'm probably gonna do a reread of this book soon because it's been a while since I've read it, but the movie is also really good as well. I highly recommend the old movie. It was really good. But yeah, I definitely recommend this book if you're looking for something scary to read. The next book in my collection is The Shining. I love this book so much. I actually went to the place where this book takes place, which is the Stanley Hotel. It is located in Estes Park, Colorado. It is also known as the Overlook, but the Torrance family move to the Overlook Hotel because Jack has a job there over the winter, and he is required to just look after the hotel and be the hotel taker. I cannot speak today, I am sorry. But he is required to be the hotel caretaker. And we discover that Danny has the Shining, and you'll find out what all that stuff means when you read this book. But it's so creepy. Highly recommend it. I loved the movie. Not everybody likes the movie, but I loved it, so definitely recommend this book. So I also have another edition of The Shining. I really love this edition. I got it off of a Instagram account. I will have that Instagram account linked in the description below, but I love this edition. It has Danny Torrance on it, and I love the spine. I love the color of this book. I think it's absolutely gorgeous. Up next, we have Night Shift. Night Shift is a short story collection. I really loved these short stories. I know that Children of the Corn is in this short story collection. I loved that. That is definitely my all-time favorite short story. Highly recommend this if you want to read some short, scary stories. I have another edition of Night Shift. I love this edition. I got it for my birthday a few years ago. I absolutely love this. Up next we have the complete and uncut edition of The Stand. This book is a brick. You could kill somebody with this book. I have never read a book this big before. This is definitely the biggest book I've ever read, and I definitely love it. This is my second favorite Stephen King book that I've ever read. It is about a pandemic, and it basically wipes out the human race. The survivors of the pandemic try and get together and stop the Black Man, and it's really good. It definitely ties into the Dark Tower series. But love it. Highly recommend. Definitely read the uncut edition if you're going to read this book. Up next we have The Long Walk. I haven't read this one. I'm pretty sure this is about boys and they are required to go on a long walk. I think it's kind of like a race or something, and they're required to walk at least, or walk or run at least 5 miles an hour, and I don't know. I really don't know the details of this book. I really need to read it. Up next we have The Dead Zone. I have not read this. I heard it was really good. I have no clue what it's about, but I am definitely going to read this soon because I've heard nothing but amazing things about this book. So yeah, let me know if you have read this. Up next we have Firestarter. I haven't read this, and the copy that I have of this is really crappy. I bought it off of eBay, I think, and somebody named Calvert wrote his name on the side. Calvert, if you're watching this, I have your book. I think it's about a woman. I think it's about a woman who starts fires. A girl who starts fires. I don't know. Next we have Cujo. I love this book. It's a fun read. It's very short. It's about a rabid dog, and his name is Cujo, and a family gets stuck in a car and they have to try and escape Cujo, and I love it. Again, if you're starting out with Stephen King, I definitely recommend this book. Up next we have the Dark Tower series. We have The Gunslinger, The Drawing of the Three, The Wastelands, Wizard and Glass, The Wind Through the Keyhole, Wolves of the Calla, Song of Susanna, and The Dark Tower. I have only read The Gunslinger, and I am planning on reading the rest of the series very soon. I read this edition of The Gunslinger. It is the illustrated edition. Next, I have Christine. I love this book so much. This is definitely probably within my top 5 Stephen King. It's about a possessed car, and her name is Christine. Sorry if I spoiled it for you. I have another edition of Christine. I have the mass market edition, and I absolutely love it. I think this edition is so beautiful. I love this so much. Next up is Pet Sematary. I love this book. This is the scariest book I have ever read. I love this so much. It's basically about this family who moves to Maine, and some creepy stuff definitely happens. There's obviously a pet cemetery involved, and I'll just say there's something beyond the pet cemetery. Next we have The Talisman. Not only is it by Stephen King, but it's also by Peter Straub. I haven't read this because I heard you have to read the Dark Tower series in order to read this, but hopefully I'll read it as soon as I'm done reading the Dark Tower series. Next I have Black House. It is the sequel to The Talisman. I have no idea what it's about, but I think it's good. Next, I have Thinner. I liked this book. I mean, it was okay. It's not the best, but it's not the worst. Basically, if you want to lose weight, go run over a gypsy. That's what happens in this book. This guy is driving with his wife, and his wife is, you know, giving him some special attention down there. while he's driving, and because of that, he doesn't pay attention and runs over a gypsy, and the gypsy curses him to lose weight. So the real question is, does he die because he's so thin, or does he figure out how to solve it? You will have to find out by reading this book. Next is The Mist. I personally didn't really enjoy this that much. I'm pretty sure it's in a short story collection. I don't know exactly which one it's in. I'm pretty sure it's in different seasons, but I could be wrong. But anyways, it's basically about this fog slash mist that falls down on this town, and the main character sees a figure come out of the mist, and them being an idiot, they decide to go to the grocery store, and people literally run out of the grocery store into the mist and die. Up next is a beloved favorite of mine. It is It. This is my all-time favorite book. I love this book so much. This was the first Stephen King book I ever read, and I love it. It's always going to be my favorite book. It will always have a special place in my heart. This is the movie tie-in edition, and it's definitely been loved. I have read this book 4 times, and I just love this so much. Basically, it's about these kids. They call themselves the Losers Club because they all have something that is unique, and that's how they form their club, and they team up to defeat Pennywise. And 27 years later, when they're in their 40s, they come back to defeat Pennywise again. And I love this. Not only is this book about horror, but it's also about friendships and love and growth and maturity. I just love this book so much. If you want something that's definitely scary but at the same time loving and thrilling, then I definitely recommend this Stephen King book. So I have another edition of it, and I love this edition. If you put it up to your face, it makes you look like a clown. I love this so much. Next, I have Misery. I like this book a lot. It is about this writer named Paul Sheldon, and he travels to Colorado for inspiration to write his last book in the Misery series. And unfortunately, he comes across his biggest fan. Her name is Annie. She's definitely a scary villain. She is so obsessed over Paul Sheldon to the point where she kidnaps him and makes him write a special misery book for her. You follow Paul Sheldon and how he writes the last misery book, and you also follow if he is able to escape or not, and it's very suspenseful. Next, we have the Tommyknockers. I heard this is like a sci-fi thriller book. I haven't read this. I got it from the used bookstore, that's why it looks very damaged. I haven't read this, and I don't really know anything about this, but I've heard it's pretty good. I heard it's slow at a few points, but I will get to this book eventually. Up next, we have The Dark Half. I haven't read this yet because I heard you have to read the Dark Tower series in order to read this book. I have no idea what it's about, but I heard it's a lot of people's favorites, so I'm really excited to read this. As soon as I'm done reading the Dark Tower series, I will definitely get on this book. Up next, I have 4 Past Midnight. This is a short story collection. I haven't read this yet, but I definitely will get to this soon. Next, I have Needful Things. This is about a store where everything is for sale. I haven't read this book yet, but I really want to. I'm just intimidated by the length of this book. Next, I have Gerald's Game. This book is about a couple, and they've been married for a very long time, and so they decide to have a getaway and fulfill their sexual desires by doing stuff. Yeah, the wife is handcuffed to the bed and the husband dies, and there's one scene that is so gruesome in this book that made me physically gag while I was reading it. Next I have Dolores Claiborne. This is about a woman who is falsely accused of a crime, and this book takes place at the police station in an interrogation room, and you can only read her answers rather than the questions that are being asked. I really liked this book. It's confusing at first, but after a few chapters you kind of catch onto it. Well, I shouldn't say chapters, there are no chapters, I should say more of sections, I guess. But I liked this book a lot. I definitely recommend this one. Dolores Claiborne is definitely one of my favorite Stephen King female characters. She is very strong and very independent, and I love this woman. Next I have Nightmares and Dreamscapes, and this is a short story collection / novella, I think. I haven't read this, but I heard it's good. Again, I'm intimidated by the length of this book. Up next is Insomnia. I thought this book was okay. It's basically about this guy who loses his wife due to a sickness, and because of that he can't sleep and he has insomnia, and he kind of witnesses these awful things happening, and there's a whole debate thing about abortion, and there is a bombing that's planning to happen, and you have to try and figure out who's doing the bombing and how you can stop that person. But yeah, I read this book in a readathon, and this book is definitely gigantic. It was quite a thick one to get through. Next I have Rose Matter. I haven't read this one, but I heard it has to do with an abusive husband, and the wife runs away, something like that. I don't really know. Next is The Green Mile. This is basically about a guy who has special powers, and he was accused of a crime, and he goes to the Green Mile, and he befriends a prison guard, and stuff happens with the prison guard, and there's definitely a creepy scene that happens with one of the other prisoners in this prison, and it's definitely a great book. I have Bag of Bones. I don't really know what it's about. I do know it has to do with a wife dying or something like that, and the husband moves to a lake, something like that. I don't really know, but I'm very intrigued by this one because I was told by a few people that this one is really creepy, so I'm excited to read this. Next I have The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon. I read this in my first readathon. I didn't really enjoy it that much. It's basically about this kid named Trisha, and she goes on a hike with her mom and her brother, and she decides to wander off like an idiot and find the bathroom, and then when she comes back, she obviously loses her family, and instead of just waiting there for help or following other people on a trail, she decides to take a shortcut, and she's an idiot. I'm sorry, I have strong feelings about this book. I thought it was the stupidest Stephen King book in my opinion. I really did not enjoy this. And Trisha, throughout the entire book, listens to her Walkman. And she listens to the Red Sox baseball games because she loves Tom Gordon. Up next is Hearts in Atlantis. I haven't read this one yet, but I heard it has to do with troops in the Vietnam War and how they're haunted by it after. I don't really know. I know there's a movie, and I heard the movie is good, so I will get to this book eventually and watch the movie as well. Up next is Storm of the Century. Basically, it's about a big storm, and it hits everybody on this town, and yeah, that's basically it. This book is interesting because it's written like a movie script. I don't know if you can read that or see that, but it's written like a movie script, and I really enjoyed the writing style of this. There's obviously a movie, but I haven't seen the movie yet, so I gotta watch it soon. Next, I have Dreamcatcher. I haven't read this. I heard that this is everybody's least favorite Stephen King book, so I'm nervous to read this. I heard that there is a really long chase scene in this book, but I gotta read it because I'm gonna read every single Stephen King book eventually, so. Up next is Everything's Eventual. I really enjoyed this book. I love the short stories. I believe 1408 is in this book, and I really loved that. Highly recommend this short story collection. It's really creepy, and I personally love it. Up next is The Colorado Kid. I haven't read this. This book is really short, so I will probably read it during my next readathon. But yeah, I don't really know what this is about. I've heard decent things about this book, so I'm excited to read this one. Next, we have the infamous book, Cell. I thought it was... I don't know what to think of this book. It definitely could have been better. It had a good drive at the beginning, within the first couple pages, but the rest of the book sucked. Basically, it's about a cell phone apocalypse type of thing, and the survivors once again get together, and the main character tries to find his son, and in the end he ends up killing his son with a cell phone. Yeah, I know, it sounds really bad. Up next is Blaze. This is technically a Richard Bachman book. I haven't read this. I'm going to get to this soon. I have yet to read Richard Bachman. We'll see how it is. Next is Duma Key. I don't really know what this is about, but I heard that it's amazing. I heard it's a really underrated book, so I'm definitely looking forward to reading this one. I might read this one on my vacation to Florida because it has a beach cover and I'm going to the beach, so I thought that was pretty fitting. Next is Just After Sunset. I absolutely love this cover. I think it's so cool. I know that this is a short story collection. I haven't read this. I don't know what short stories are in this, but hopefully I will get to this book soon. Up next we have Under the Dome. This is massive. It's over 1,000 pages, and I'm very intimidated by this. I haven't read this. I heard it's really good. I heard it's about this town in Maine, and one day a dome just completely falls on top of this town. No one knows who did it or why or how to get it off or what happened, and this entire town is just completely isolated. Like, just imagine being separated by a piece of glass and a loved one is standing right outside of the glass that you can physically see, but you can't touch. Like, that would be awful. Next up is 11/22/63. I haven't read this one, but I know it is about this guy who tries to stop the JFK assassination. However, he can only go back in time to the year 1958, which is when it takes place. So there is a little bit of an interloop with it in this book, and I can't wait to read it. Next up is Dr. Sleep. This book is the sequel to The Shining. It literally takes place right after The Shining. It's such a beautiful continuation. I am currently reading it right now. It is about Danny Torrance and how he struggles with The Shining when he's older, and there's a cult in this book, and the poor baseball boy. For those of you who have read this book know what I'm talking about. Next, I have Mr. Mercedes. This is the first book in the Bill Hodges trilogy. Basically, what happens is a murderer, I should say. He drives a Mercedes over all these people at a town job fair, and Bill Hodges has to try and figure out who did it because he is the retired detective, and he has some unsolved things he needs to do with this case. And it takes place from Bill Hodges' perspective as well as the murderer's perspective. This is one of my favorite Stephen King books. I absolutely love this. If you're looking for something that will definitely keep you on the edge of your seat, read this book. I highly recommend it. Next is Finders Keepers. This is the second book to the Bill Hodges trilogy. I can't really say what it's about without spoiling it, but it's a definitely great continuation off of Mr. Mercedes. You also follow some new characters in this book as well as the old characters from the previous book, and it is so good. I absolutely love this book. Next is the final book in the trilogy, which is End of Watch. I am reading it right now. I can't really say what this one's about because I just started it, so I've only read the beginning, but so far it's really good and I'm definitely enjoying it. Next I have the Bill Hodges trilogy in the hardbacks in the Spine Art edition, and it shows a smiley face, and on the side it says Stephen King, and there's like blood drops everywhere, and then it says the Bill Hodges trilogy, and there's like blood drops, and I absolutely love this. Up next is Revival. I love this cover so much. I don't really know what it's about, but I'm probably going to read this book in my next readathon, and it's really short. I've heard it's pretty good, and I'm excited about it. Next is Sleeping Beauties. This book was better than I thought it was going to be. It's about this paranormal world that involves women, and when the women go to sleep, they have this disease called the aurora, and basically when they fall asleep, they form cocoons, and they go to this paranormal world. I cannot speak today, guys, I'm really sorry. And in the end, they have the choice to be able to stay in that world or leave. And the men who are stuck in reality are like, how the heck do we get the women back? It was definitely a big book for me to read, but I powered through it, guys. The final book in my collection is The Outsider, and I don't know what to think of this. I mean, it was okay. Basically, there's a crime and nobody knows who did it, and yeah. It was okay. You have to read the Bill Hodges trilogy before you can read this. So, I didn't know that when I first read this book, so maybe I can go back and reread this book after I finish the Bill Hodges trilogy. So, I was editing this video and I completely forgot to make this announcement. So, Bella from Bellatrix Reads and I are hosting a 24-hour readathon on July 3rd. The theme for this readathon is horror. You can read any horror book or any horror story that you like, or you don't even have to abide by the theme at all, but the readathon will last for a full 24 hours. And it will start at 12 a.m. on your time zone, and it will end at 11:59 p.m. on your time zone. And Bella and I will both be vlogging it for our YouTube channels. I will have her YouTube linked down below, so that way you can go subscribe to her channel. We hope to see you guys participating, and please comment down below if you're going to participate, and if so, what books are you going to be reading? I believe I showed you my entire collection. Thank you guys so much for watching. Comment down below which Stephen King books you have read, or which Stephen King book is your favorite, or if you agree with my opinions and synopsises. Synopsises? Is that how you say it? I don't know. Alright. Thank you so much for watching. Have a nice day. If you like this video, please like, subscribe, and turn on those post notifications. Bye!